The scent of expensive cologne and cigarette smoke hung in the air of the upscale restaurant where I worked, a toxic cloud that seemed to follow me from table to table. My feet ached in the black heels I was required to wear, and the tight pencil skirt restricted my movements as I balanced 3 plates of overpriced pasta on my forearm. 6 months at Bellissimo, and I still wasn't used to the uniform, or the way some customers looked at me like I was just another item on the menu. "Table 7 needs more wine," Marco, the floor manager, hissed as he passed by. His eyes narrowed at my momentary pause to catch my breath. I nodded quickly, my heart hammering against my ribs. 6 more hours of this shift. 6 more hours until I could pick up Emma from my neighbor's apartment and hold my 4-year-old daughter close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo instead of this suffocating mix of perfume and desperation. The restaurant buzzed with Friday night energy. Couples on dates, businessmen making deals over bourbon, wealthy families celebrating milestones with no regard for those serving them. I kept my head down, trying to be invisible while still being attentive enough to earn decent tips. Every dollar mattered now that I was on my own. "Excuse me, miss?" A woman with diamond earrings the size of grapes raised a manicured finger. "This risotto is overcooked. I'm so sorry, ma'am. I'll have the kitchen prepare a new one right away." I took the barely touched plate, wondering if her complaint was legitimate, or if she simply enjoyed the power of sending food back. As I turned toward the kitchen, the front doors of the restaurant swung open, letting in a blast of autumn air that sent a chill down my spine. And then I saw him. David. My ex-husband. My body froze, the plate nearly slipping from my grasp. He hadn't seen me yet. He was speaking to the hostess, one hand casually in the pocket of his tailored suit. He looked good. Too good for someone who had abandoned his family, who had drained our bank accounts before disappearing for months, only to return with divorce papers and a new girlfriend. Panic rose in my throat like bile. I couldn't face him. Not here. Not now, not in this humiliating uniform while he stood there looking like he owned the world he'd stolen from me. I scanned the room desperately for an escape route, but the kitchen was on the other side of the dining area. I'd have to walk right past him. The hostess was checking the reservation book. Any second now, she would lead him to a table, and he would see me. His eyes would widen in mock surprise, and then that smirk would appear, the one that said he'd won, that he was dining at a 5-star restaurant while I was serving in it. I made a split-second decision. Abandoning the rejected risotto on a nearby empty table, I moved swiftly toward the bar area, where a group of well-dressed men sat with their backs to the entrance. Without thinking, I slid into the empty space beside a broad-shouldered figure in a dark suit, and in a moment of pure desperation, I grabbed his hand where it rested on the bar counter. The hand I seized was warm, unexpectedly soft yet firm, with a heavy gold signet ring on the pinky finger. I felt the man stiffen beside me, but I couldn't look at him yet. My eyes were fixed on David, who was now scanning the restaurant, nodding at something the hostess was saying. "I'm so sorry," I whispered urgently to the stranger whose hand I was clutching like a lifeline. "My ex-husband just walked in, and I just can't deal with him right now. Please, just for a minute, pretend you know me." I finally turned to look at the man whose personal space I had so rudely invaded, and my breath caught in my throat. Dark eyes met mine, so intensely brown they appeared almost black in the dim lighting of the bar. They were deep-set under straight brows, observant and eerily still, like a predator assessing whether something was worth the chase. His face was all sharp angles, high cheekbones, a strong jaw darkened by 5 o'clock shadow, and lips pressed into a thin line of surprise or displeasure. I couldn't tell which. He was older than me, perhaps in his early 40s, with salt and pepper at his temples that only enhanced his aura of authority. For a terrifying moment he said nothing, just studied me with those unsettling eyes. Then, something shifted in his expression, a decision made. "Alessandra," he said, his voice a low rumble that sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. It wasn't a question, but a statement, as if he was choosing a name for me on the spot. "I was wondering where you'd disappeared to." His accent was subtle but unmistakable. Italian, maybe, or somewhere in the Mediterranean. The way he slightly rolled the R in wondering made the common word somehow exotic. I released a breath I didn't know I was holding, relief washing over me. "Sorry to keep you waiting," I managed, my voice steadier than I expected. From the corner of my eye, I saw David being led to a table across the restaurant. He hadn't noticed me yet, but it was only a matter of time in the relatively open space. The stranger followed my gaze, his eyes narrowing slightly as they landed on David. Then, with a smoothness that seemed practiced, he shifted his body to shield me from view, simultaneously releasing my hand, only to place his own on the small of my back. The weight of it felt both protective and possessive, and despite myself, I leaned into his touch, grateful for the cover. "Is that him?" he asked, his breath warm against my ear. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Former husband?" Another question. Another nod from me. "Recent?" "A year," I whispered. "But he's been difficult." Something dangerous flashed in the stranger's eyes. There and gone so quickly I thought I might have imagined it, his hand on my back pressed slightly firmer. "Vincent," a voice called from behind us, and I noticed for the first time that the other men at the bar were watching our interaction with curious eyes. One of them, a tall man with a scar running along his jawline, seemed particularly interested, his gaze calculating as it moved between us. "Not now, Enzo." My unexpected savior, Vincent, replied without looking away from me. His tone left no room for argument, and the man named Enzo immediately backed down, turning to mutter something to the others. I became acutely aware of the strange dynamic I had stumbled into. These weren't ordinary businessmen having drinks after work. There was something about their posture, the deference they showed to Vincent, the way other patrons seemed to give their group a wide berth without even realizing they were doing it. "Your name," Vincent said softly, his eyes still holding mine. "Your real one." I hesitated. Giving my name to a stranger felt suddenly intimate, dangerous even, but he had already helped me without question, and I was still clutching his arm like it was a piece of driftwood in a stormy sea. "Lily," I said finally. "Lily Cooper." Something like approval flickered across his face. "Lily," he repeated, as if testing how it felt on his tongue. "You work here?" I nodded, suddenly embarrassed by my waitress uniform, by the desperate situation that had led me to grab this clearly powerful man's hand. "I should get back to, you're afraid," he interrupted, his observation cutting through my attempt to retreat. "Not just of seeing your ex. You're afraid of something else." It wasn't a question, but the accuracy of his assessment startled me. How could he possibly know about the overdue rent, the threatening letters from David's lawyer about custody, the nights I lay awake wondering how I'd ever rebuild the life that had been shattered? Before I could respond, I saw David stand up from his table, heading in the direction of the restrooms, which would bring him right past the bar. "He's coming this way," I whispered, panic rising again. Vincent's response was immediate and unexpected. He raised his hand, and with a subtle gesture I almost missed, the man named Enzo moved smoothly to intercept David's path, appearing to accidentally bump into him and engage him in conversation, steering him toward a different route to the restrooms. I stared at Vincent in shock. "How did you need to leave?" he asked, ignoring my unfinished question. I can't. My shift doesn't end for hours, and I need this job. I need the money." The admission tasted bitter on my tongue. Vincent's eyes traveled over my face, taking in details I wasn't even aware were visible. The exhaustion, the worry, perhaps even the faint bruise on my cheekbone that makeup couldn't quite conceal. A parting gift from David during our last encounter, when I'd refused to let him see Emma while he was drunk. "What time do you finish?" "Midnight," I replied automatically, then immediately regretted sharing the information. He nodded once, decisively. "I'll wait." "No, that's not necessary. You've already helped enough by—" "I'll wait," he repeated, firmer this time. It wasn't an offer, but a statement of fact. "You shouldn't be alone if he decides to linger." A throat cleared behind us, and I turned to find Marco glaring at me, his eyes darting between me and Vincent, a mix of anger and nervousness on his face. "Cooper, Table 12 has been waiting for their check for 10 minutes, he snapped, though his usual bite seemed tempered by Vincent's presence. "I'm sorry, I was just—" "She was assisting me," Vincent cut in smoothly, his voice dropping to a register that somehow made Marco take a physical step back. I believe I requested her specifically. Marco's face paled visibly. Mr. Russo, I didn't realize... Of course, sir. Take all the time you need, Lily. He retreated quickly, throwing one last nervous glance over his shoulder. Mr. Russo. The name meant nothing to me, but it clearly meant something to Marco, who had never before addressed me by my first name or shown any flexibility with break times. You know my boss? I asked, confusion momentarily overriding my anxiety about David. A slight smile touched Vincent's lips, but didn't reach his eyes. I know many people in this city. It wasn't really an answer, but the way he said it made me certain I wouldn't get a clearer one. I really should get back to work, I said, reluctantly pulling away from his protective proximity. But thank you, truly. Vincent reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a business card, pressing it into my palm. It was heavy, cream-colored cardstock, with just a name and phone number embossed in dark ink. Vincent Russo. If he approaches you, call this number immediately, he said, closing my fingers around the card. Anytime. I nodded, slipping the card into the pocket of my apron, aware that I was accepting something more significant than just a phone number. The weight of his gaze followed me as I returned to my duties, somehow both comforting and unsettling. For the rest of my shift, I moved through the restaurant in a daze, hyper-aware of two things. David, who thankfully remained absorbed in his dinner date with a blonde woman I didn't recognize, and Vincent, whose commanding presence at the bar seemed to alter the very atmosphere of the room. Occasionally, our eyes would meet across the space, and each time, a strange current would pass through me, a mixture of gratitude, curiosity, and something else I couldn't quite name, something dangerous. What I didn't realize then, as I delivered plates and filled wine glasses with trembling hands, was that in my moment of desperate need, I hadn't just grabbed any stranger's hand. I had grabbed the hand of Vincent Russo, a man whose name was whispered in fear throughout the city, whose business dealings were never discussed in the open, and whose enemies had a habit of disappearing without a trace. I had grabbed the hand of a Mafia boss, and unknowingly, I had just entangled my fate with his. As midnight approached, my anxiety spiraled with each passing minute. Vincent and his men had left the bar area an hour earlier, moving to a private dining room in the back of the restaurant. I told myself it was relief I felt at his departure, relief that I could focus on my job, relief that the inexplicable tension coiling in my stomach whenever his dark eyes found mine had dissipated. But as I counted out my tips in the break room, barely enough to cover Emma's daycare for 3 days, I couldn't deny the disappointment weighing on me. He had said he would wait, and I had believed him. The realization that I had put stock in a stranger's words made me angry at myself. Had I learned nothing from David's broken promises? I changed out of my uniform in the cramped employee bathroom, pulling on worn jeans and a sweater that had once been soft but was now pilled from too many washes. My reflection in the smudged mirror looked exhausted, dark circles under eyes that had forgotten how to sparkle, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail that did nothing to soften the sharp angles worry had carved into my face. "You okay, Lily?" asked Tara, another waitress, as she applied a fresh coat of lipstick. "You seem distracted tonight." "I'm fine," I lied, the words so familiar they fell from my lips without thought. "Just tired." She nodded sympathetically. "Don't forget your coat. It's gotten cold out there." I thanked her and grabbed my thin jacket from the hook, mentally calculating the bus schedule. The last bus to my neighborhood would leave in 20 minutes. If I hurried, I could make it. The alternative was a 30-minute walk through parts of the city I preferred to avoid after dark. Marco was waiting by the employee exit, counting cash for the register. He looked up as I approached, his usual disdainful expression replaced by something that resembled respect or fear. "Cooper," he said, clearing his throat. "Mr. Russo left this for you." He handed me an envelope, thick and heavy. I stared at it, uncomprehending. "What is it?" Marco shrugged, though his eyes remained fixed on the envelope. "He said you'd need a ride home." Before I could respond, the door beside us opened, letting in a blast of cold air along with the tall man I recognized as Enzo from earlier. Without the dim lighting of the bar, I could see his features more clearly. The scar on his jaw was longer than I'd realized, running from his ear almost to his chin, and his eyes were a startling pale blue against his olive skin. "Ms. Cooper," he said with a slight nod. "Mr. Russo sent me to drive you home." My pulse quickened. "That's not necessary. I can take the bus." Enzo's expression didn't change. "The last bus left 10 minutes ago." I checked my watch in alarm. He was right. I'd lost track of time counting tips, and now I was stranded. "I can walk," I insisted, though the thought of the long, cold journey made my tired feet ache in protest. "Mr. Russo was quite clear," Enzo replied, his tone making it evident this wasn't a request. "The car is waiting." I hesitated, clutching the mysterious envelope. Every instinct told me to decline, to maintain the boundary between my desperate world and whatever dangerous realm Vincent inhabited. But the practical reality of my situation, exhausted, miles from home with the temperature dropping, made the decision for me. "Fine," I conceded. "Thank you." Marco watched our exchange with undisguised curiosity, and I could already imagine the rumors that would circulate tomorrow. Lily Cooper, single mother and nobody waitress, somehow connected to Vincent Russo. I didn't understand the significance of that connection yet, but Marco's reaction told me enough to know it was substantial. I followed Enzo out to the parking lot, where a sleek black SUV with tinted windows idled, its engine a quiet purr in the night. He opened the back door for me, and I slid onto leather seats so soft they felt like butter against my jeans. "Your address?" Enzo asked, as he took the driver's seat, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror. I hesitated again, the thought of this man, this stranger, knowing where my daughter and I lived making my skin crawl, but he waited patiently, offering no pressure or threat, simply expecting my compliance. Finally, I gave him my address, watching his face for any reaction to the neighborhood, one of the poorest in the city, where rent was just barely within my means. His expression remained impassive as he pulled out of the parking lot. In the privacy of the back seat, I opened the envelope Marco had given me. Inside was a stack of cash, more money than I made in 2 weeks of shifts, and a note written in elegant, slanted handwriting. "For your trouble tonight. The car will take you home safely. VR." I stared at the money in shock, then quickly stuffed it back into the envelope, my cheeks burning with a mixture of humiliation and anger. Did he think I had fabricated the situation with David as some kind of con? Or worse, did he think I was the kind of woman who could be bought? "I can't accept this," I said, my voice tight as I addressed Enzo's reflection. "Please take it back to Mr. Russo with my thanks, but I can't take his money." Enzo's eyes flicked to mine briefly before returning to the road. "That would be unwise." "I don't care if it's unwise," I shot back, surprising myself with my vehemence. "I'm not for sale." Something that might have been respect flickered across Enzo's stoic features. "Mr. Russo doesn't pay for people, Ms. Cooper. He compensates for inconvenience or rewards loyalty. The distinction matters to him." His words gave me pause. I thought of how Vincent had interfered when David was heading toward the bar, how he had somehow made Marco treat me with deference for the first time since I'd started working at Bellissimo. Why would he care about my inconvenience? I asked, more to myself than to Enzo. "That," Enzo replied after a moment of silence, "is a question I cannot answer." We drove the rest of the way in silence, the lights of the city sliding over us like ghostly fingers as we moved from the affluent downtown area to the increasingly dilapidated outskirts where I lived. When Enzo finally pulled up in front of my apartment building, a tired 5-story walk-up with graffiti decorating its lower walls, he stepped out to open my door with the same formal courtesy he might have shown to someone arriving at a gala. "Mr. Russo would appreciate if you kept the envelope," he said as I stepped out, the cold night air immediately seeping through my thin jacket. "Consider it a gesture of goodwill." I clutched the envelope, conflicted. The money inside would cover next month's rent with enough left over for new winter boots for Emma. The practical part of me, the mother part, couldn't justify refusing it out of pride. "Thank him for the ride," I said finally, neither accepting nor rejecting the money outright. "And for earlier." Enzo nodded once, then handed me a small card, identical to the one Vincent had given me earlier. "Mr. Russo's private number. He suggested you keep it somewhere safe." Before I could respond, my attention was drawn to a car parked across the street. A silver Audi I recognized instantly, its engine off, but a figure clearly visible in the driver's seat. David. Fear shot through me like ice water in my veins. How had he found my new address? I'd been so careful, moving across the city and changing my phone number after the last time he'd shown up drunk, pounding on my door and screaming accusations until a neighbor called the police. Enzo followed my gaze, his posture shifting subtly. "Is that him? Your ex?" I nodded, unable to speak past the knot of terror in my throat. Without a word, Enzo moved to stand between me and the view of David's car, his hand disappearing briefly inside his jacket before returning to his side. "Go inside, Ms. Cooper. Lock your door. I'll ensure he doesn't follow." "You don't have to." "I insist." He cut me off, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Mr. Russo would be displeased if I left you unprotected." The word displeased carried a weight that sent a shiver down my spine, not for my safety, but for what it implied about Vincent's potential reaction and power. I hurried inside the building, my heart hammering against my ribs as I climbed the 4 flights of stairs to my apartment. Mrs. Patel, my elderly neighbor who watched Emma when I worked nights, opened her door at the sound of my footsteps. "She's sleeping," Mrs. Patel whispered with a warm smile. "Not a peep all night. Such a good girl." "Thank you," I breathed, trying to hide my distress as I followed her into her apartment. Emma was curled up on the fold-out couch, her dark curls splayed across the pillow, one small hand clutching her tattered stuffed rabbit. The sight of her peaceful face temporarily pushed away my fear. I gathered her into my arms, careful not to wake her, and thanked Mrs. Patel again before carrying Emma across the hall to our apartment. Once inside, I locked the door, engaged the flimsy chain, and carried Emma to the single bedroom we shared. After tucking her in, I moved to the window that overlooked the street, peering cautiously through the thin curtains. Enzo still stood beside the SUV, his tall figure illuminated by the streetlight, while David's Audi remained in the same spot. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, as if making a decision, David's car door opened, and he stepped out. Even from this distance, I could see the belligerent set of his shoulders, the unsteady way he moved. He'd been drinking. My hand instinctively reached for my phone, ready to call 911, but I watched in frozen fascination as David approached Enzo. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw David gesturing wildly, pointing toward the building. Toward me, Enzo remained perfectly still, his posture relaxed yet somehow menacing. Then, with a speed that startled me, Enzo closed the distance between them, leaning in to speak directly into David's ear. Whatever he said drained all the color from David's face. He stumbled back, nearly tripping over his own feet in his haste to return to his car. Within seconds, the Audi's engine roared to life, and David sped away, tires squealing against the pavement. Enzo looked up then, directly at my window, as if he had known I was watching all along. He gave a small nod before returning to the SUV and driving away, the taillights disappearing around the corner. I sank to the floor beneath the window, the envelope of cash still clutched in my hand, my mind racing. What had I done by grabbing Vincent Russo's hand? What world had I inadvertently stepped into? Sleep evaded me that night. I lay beside Emma, listening to her soft breathing, my thoughts a chaotic swirl of fear, gratitude, and an emotion I didn't want to name. A dangerous curiosity about the man whose intervention had, at least for tonight, kept David at bay. Morning came with the soft patter of rain against the window and Emma's small hands patting my cheeks. "Mommy, wake up. It's Pancake Saturday," I forced a smile, pushing away the exhaustion. "That's right, baby. Pancake Saturday it is." As Emma chattered about what shapes she wanted her pancakes in, I moved through our morning routine on autopilot, my mind still replaying the events of the previous night. The envelope of cash sat on top of the refrigerator where I'd placed it, both out of Emma's reach and out of my direct line of sight, as if not seeing it would somehow make the moral dilemma it represented disappear. After breakfast, while Emma was engrossed in her favorite cartoon, I finally allowed myself to count the money properly. $5,000. More than enough for rent, for new winter clothes for Emma, for the dental work I'd been postponing, and still have some left over. Money that could change everything, at least temporarily. Money from a man who, If Marco's reaction and Enzo's deference were any indication, was not someone I should be involved with. I was still staring at the cash when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Did you sleep well, Lily? VR." My heart leaped into my throat. How had he gotten my number? I hadn't given it to him or to Enzo. The implication that he could so easily access my personal information sent a chill through me. Yet there was also a traitorous warmth at the thought that he had bothered to check on me. Before I could decide whether to respond, another text came through. "Your ex won't be a problem anymore. Consider it handled." My fingers hovered over the keyboard, a dozen responses forming and dissolving in my mind. Finally, I typed, "I don't know what Enzo said to him, but thank you. I should tell you, though, that I can't accept the money." His response was immediate. "We'll discuss it tonight. 8 p.m. I'll send a car. Not a request, but a statement. An assumption that I would comply." The presumption should have angered me, but instead, I felt a flicker of anticipation, quickly smothered by practical concerns. "I can't. I have my daughter." There was a longer pause before his next text. "Bring her. She'll be safe." I stared at the message, shock rendering me momentarily speechless. Bring Emma to meet a man I knew nothing about, a man who was clearly involved in activities outside the law. It was unthinkable. "That's not possible. I'm sorry." This time, the pause stretched for so long I thought he had given up. Then, "Your daughter will remain with Enzo's sister Maria, in the garden room. She's a certified childcare provider. You and I will dine separately. This is important, Lily. Please." The please caught me off guard. It was the first time his communications had included anything resembling a request, rather than a command. And beyond that, the thoroughness of his planning, a certified childcare provider, suggested he had anticipated my objections. "Mommy, can I have juice?" Emma's voice pulled me from my thoughts. As I poured apple juice into her favorite sippy cup, decorated with faded princesses, I weighed my options. I could refuse Vincent's invitation, return the money somehow, and hope that David had been scared off permanently. Or I could meet with Vincent, understand what exactly had transpired, and perhaps gain some clarity on why this powerful man had taken such an interest in my problems. "Here you go, sweetheart," I said, handing Emma her juice. "How would you feel about going on a little adventure tonight? With dragons?" she asked hopefully, her brown eyes, so like mine, wide with excitement. I smiled, smoothing her wild curls. Maybe not dragons, but there might be a garden. As Emma returned to her cartoon, chattering about gardens and flowers, I picked up my phone and typed a response I hoped I wouldn't regret. "We'll be ready at 8. The black SUV arrived precisely at 8, idling quietly in front of my building like a sleek predator. I stood at the window, watching as Enzo stepped out and scanned the street with practiced vigilance before approaching the entrance. "Who's that man, Mommy?" Emma asked, peering around my legs at the window. She was dressed in her nicest outfit, a purple corduroy dress with leggings, and the light-up sneakers she insisted on wearing everywhere. I'd spent an hour trying to tame her curls into 2 neat braids, my hands trembling slightly as I worked. "That's our driver for tonight," I explained, smoothing non-existent wrinkles from my own dress, the only nice one I owned, a simple black wrap style that had survived from my previous life with David. "Remember what I told you? We're going to have dinner at a special place." Emma nodded solemnly, clutching her stuffed rabbit closer. "And I'm going to play in a garden with a nice lady while you talk to your friend." Friend? The word felt wrong for whatever Vincent was to me. Savior? Threat? Both, perhaps. A sharp knock at the door made me jump. Emma ran to answer it before I could stop her, though she was still too short to reach the chain lock. "Emma, wait!" I called, but she had already thrown the door open as far as the chain would allow. "Hello," she chirped up at Enzo, fearless in the way only children can be. "Are you the dragon?" To my surprise, Enzo's stern face softened almost imperceptibly. He crouched down to Emma's eye level, his massive frame folding with unexpected grace. "No dragons tonight, little one," he said, his voice gentler than I'd heard it before. "But I've been told there might be ice cream for good girls who listen to their mothers." Emma's eyes widened. "I'm a very good listener," she declared, then turned to me. "Aren't I, Mommy?" The best, I agreed, unlatching the chain with fingers that still wouldn't quite stop trembling. Emma, this is Mr. Enzo. Enzo, my daughter Emma. Enzo nodded at me, then returned his attention to Emma. It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Emma. Shall we go? The car is waiting. Is it a princess car? Emma asked, slipping her small hand trustingly into Enzo's massive one. Something like that, he replied, the faintest hint of amusement in his voice. I grabbed my purse and Emma's small backpack, which I'd packed with her favorite coloring books and a change of clothes, a habit from years of preparing for David's unpredictability. As I locked the apartment door behind us, a voice in my head screamed that I was making a terrible mistake. What kind of mother brings her child to meet a man like Vincent Russo? But another voice, quieter yet more insistent, reminded me that for the first time in over a year, David had backed down. For the first time, I'd seen genuine fear in the eyes of the man who had terrorized me since our divorce, and that alone made me willing to step into the unknown. The SUV was even more luxurious than I remembered, with plush leather seats and darkened windows that concealed the interior from outside eyes. Emma bounced excitedly as Enzo secured her in a booster seat that definitely hadn't been there the night before. "Look, Mommy! The seat has cup holders!" she exclaimed, exploring every feature with delighted fingers. I smiled at her enthusiasm while my own stomach twisted with anxiety. "Yes, baby. Very fancy." Enzo closed our doors and took his place in the driver's seat. "Mr. Russo is looking forward to seeing you again, Ms. Cooper," he said, his eyes meeting mine briefly in the rearview mirror. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The city lights blurred outside the window as we drove, moving from my rundown neighborhood through increasingly affluent areas. Emma pressed her face against the glass, entranced by the glittering storefronts and towering buildings. "Where are we going?" I finally asked, as we turned onto a tree-lined avenue in the city's most exclusive district. "Mr. Russo's residence," Enzo replied simply. "His residence. Not a restaurant or public place, but his home." The intimacy of the invitation wasn't lost on me, nor was the vulnerability it created. In a restaurant, I could walk out if needed. A private home offered no such escape. We pulled up to a gated property set back from the street, surrounded by a high stone wall covered in flowering vines. A security guard stepped forward, examined the car, then nodded to Enzo, before the wrought iron gates swung open silently. The driveway curved through manicured gardens before revealing a house that took my breath away. A modern mansion of glass and stone, its windows glowing with warm light against the darkening evening sky. It wasn't ostentatious like some of the neighboring properties, but its quiet elegance spoke of immense wealth and refined taste. "Wow," Emma whispered, her eyes wide. "Is this where the king lives?" A lump formed in my throat. "Something like that, sweetheart." Enzo parked at the front entrance, where stone steps led up to massive double doors. Before he could exit to open our doors, one of them swung open and a woman emerged, petite with olive skin and dark hair pulled into a neat bun. She wore simple black pants and a crisp white blouse, her only adornment a delicate gold cross at her throat. "You must be Lily," she said warmly as Enzo helped us from the car. "And this beautiful girl must be Emma. I'm Maria." Her accent was similar to Vincent's but slightly stronger, her words musical and flowing. Emma, suddenly shy, pressed against my leg, but offered a small wave. "It's nice to meet you," I said, extending my hand. "Thank you for watching Emma tonight." Maria took my hand in both of hers, her touch warm and reassuring. "It's my pleasure. Vincent told me she's a special little girl." She crouched down to Emma's level. "I have a garden room with flowers that light up at night, and there's a special teddy bear waiting who needs a friend. Would you like to meet him?" Emma's shyness evaporated instantly. "Yes, please. Can I, Mommy?" I hesitated, still uncertain about separating from my daughter in this unfamiliar place. Maria seemed to sense my concern. "The garden room is just through there," she said, pointing to a glass-walled space visible from the entrance hall. "You can see us the entire time, and there are security cameras in every corner. Emma will be perfectly safe with me." The mention of security cameras should have been comforting, but it only reinforced the strangeness of my situation. What kind of life required such constant surveillance? Go ahead, baby, I said finally, bending to kiss Emma's forehead. I'll be right here if you need me. I'll be fine, Mommy, Emma said, with the exasperated confidence of a child who believes herself much older than her years. You go talk to your friend now. She skipped off with Maria, chattering about light-up flowers and teddy bears, leaving me standing in the vast entrance hall with Enzo, who cleared his throat. Mr. Russo is waiting in the library. This way, please. He led me through the house, each room we passed more impressive than the last. Soaring ceilings, museum-quality artwork, furniture that managed to be both clearly expensive and genuinely comfortable looking. Nothing ostentatious or gaudy, just quiet, confident wealth. We paused outside a set of wooden double doors, intricately carved with a pattern of leaves and vines. Mr. Russo values his privacy, Enzo said, his voice low. What you see and hear tonight should remain between you and him. It wasn't quite a threat, but the message was clear. I understand, I replied, though I wasn't sure I did. Not really. Enzo nodded, apparently satisfied, and opened one of the doors, gesturing for me to enter. The library was breathtaking. 2 stories of bookshelves reaching toward a coffered ceiling, a spiral staircase of wrought iron connecting to a balcony that circled the upper level. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace at one end, casting dancing shadows across leather-bound volumes and illuminating the man who stood before it. Vincent Russo turned as I entered, and my heart stuttered in my chest. Outside the dim lighting of the restaurant, he was even more striking, tall and broad-shouldered in a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly. His dark hair combed back from a face that belonged on ancient Roman coins. Power radiated from him like heat from the fire, invisible but undeniable. Lily, he said, my name in his accented voice sending an unexpected shiver down my spine. Thank you for coming. The door closed behind me with a soft click, and I suddenly felt very alone, very far from the world I knew. Your home is beautiful, I said, because it seemed safer than asking any of the questions burning in my mind. A slight smile touched his lips. Thank you. Would you like a drink? Wine, perhaps? I shook my head. I need to keep a clear head, for Emma. Something like approval flickered in his dark eyes. Of course. Please, sit. He gestured to a seating area near the fire, 2 leather armchairs with a small table between them. I perched on the edge of one, my back straight, hands folded in my lap to hide their trembling. Vincent took the other chair, his movements fluid and controlled. Up close, I could see faint lines at the corners of his eyes, a thin scar above his right eyebrow, details that humanized his otherwise intimidating perfection. You're afraid, he observed, just as he had in the restaurant. You don't need to be. Not of me. I don't even know you, I said, finding my voice at last. But I know enough to understand that you're not just a businessman, Mr. Russo. Vincent, he corrected gently. And no, not just a businessman. But tonight, I'm simply a man having dinner with a beautiful woman who interests him. Heat rushed to my cheeks at his directness. Why? Why would someone like you be interested in someone like me? He studied me for a long moment, his gaze intense but not unkind. Someone like you, he repeated thoughtfully. A strong woman raising a child alone, working multiple jobs, surviving despite every obstacle. You underestimate your worth, Lily Cooper. The words were like a physical touch, stirring something long dormant within me. After years of David's constant belittlement, of being made to feel worthless and replaceable, Vincent's assessment left me speechless. He leaned forward slightly, his elbows on his knees. Last night, when you grabbed my hand, you did something no one has done in a very long time. What's that? I asked, barely above a whisper. You surprised me. His smile was small, but genuine. In my world, surprise is rare. People are predictable, driven by greed, fear, ambition, but you acted on pure instinct, with no calculation. It was refreshing. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I changed the subject. What did Enzo say to David last night? Whatever it was, it worked. I've never seen him back down like that. Vincent's expression hardened, the warmth vanishing so completely it was as if it had never existed. He told your ex-husband that if he ever approached you or Emma again, there would be consequences he couldn't imagine. And David believed him. People tend to believe Enzo. Vincent's tone was matter-of-fact. Your ex-husband is a coward who preys on those he perceives as weaker than himself. Show him real power, and he crumbles. I thought of David's face as he fled, the genuine fear in his eyes. Will he stay away? Yes, Vincent said with absolute certainty. He's been made to understand that you and Emma are under my protection now. The phrase sent conflicting emotions through me. Relief at the thought of David's torment ending, but also apprehension at what under my protection might entail. I appreciate what you've done, I said carefully, but I can't be indebted to you. The money, the car rides, the threats to David. It's too much. I don't have anything to offer in return. Vincent's eyes darkened. I'm not looking for repayment, Lily. Everyone wants something, I insisted, years of hard lessons making me cynical, especially men with power. He nodded slowly, acknowledging the truth in my words. What I want is simple. Dinner, conversation, your company, freely given. Just dinner? I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. A hint of amusement crossed his face. For now, I find that I enjoy your presence, your honesty. It's rare in my world. Before I could respond, a soft knock at the door interrupted us. Vincent called out something in Italian, and the door opened to reveal an older man in the uniform of a butler. Dinner is served, sir, he announced with a slight bow. Vincent stood, extending his hand to me. Shall we? I hesitated only briefly before placing my hand in his, allowing him to lead me from the library. We passed through a formal dining room with a table that could seat 20, but Vincent guided me instead to a smaller, more intimate space. A glass-enclosed terrace overlooking the illuminated gardens. A table for two was set with fine china and crystal, candles flickering in the center. Through the glass walls, I could see the garden room where Emma was playing with Maria, surrounded by flowers that indeed seemed to glow with soft, changing colors. My daughter's laughter was faintly audible, the sound easing some of my anxiety. She's safe, Vincent said, following my gaze. Maria is my sister. There's no one I trust more with children. Your sister? I asked, surprised by this personal detail. He nodded, pulling out my chair. Yes, she was a kindergarten teacher before. He paused, before certain events made it safer for her to work privately. As I sat, I caught a glimpse of something on Vincent's wrist. A tattoo partially visible beneath his suit sleeve, intricate lines in dark ink. He noticed my gaze and smoothly adjusted his cuff to cover it. The butler appeared with the first course, a delicate soup that smelled of saffron and the sea. As we ate, Vincent steered the conversation to lighter topics. Books we'd read, places we'd traveled. My list embarrassingly short compared to his. Music we enjoyed. He was surprisingly easy to talk to, intelligent and attentive, asking questions about Emma and listening with genuine interest to my answers. By the time dessert arrived, a chocolate confection that melted on my tongue, I had almost forgotten the circumstances that had brought me here. Almost. Your ex-husband, Vincent said abruptly, setting down his wineglass. He did more than just leave you, didn't he? The sudden change of topic jarred me. What do you mean? Vincent's eyes were dark and knowing. The way you flinched when the waiter dropped a plate tonight, the bruise on your cheekbone that you tried to cover with makeup, the fear in your eyes when you saw him at the restaurant. Not just discomfort, but terror. I looked down at my plate, shame washing over me, though I knew it shouldn't be mine to bear. It wasn't always bad, I said quietly. In the beginning, he was charming, successful, everything I thought I wanted. But after Emma was born, things changed. He started drinking more, staying out late. When I questioned him, he'd get angry. Vincent remained silent, allowing me to continue at my own pace. The first time he hit me, he cried afterward, promised it would never happen again. I believed him. I gave a bitter laugh. By the third time, there were no more tears, no more promises, just accusations that I had provoked him, that I deserved it. No one deserves that, Vincent said, his voice low and dangerous. No one. I tried to leave once, before the divorce. He found us at my mother's house and I swallowed hard. He broke my wrist, said if I ever took Emma from him again, he'd kill me and take her himself. Vincent's hand tightened around his wine glass, the only visible sign of his anger. When did you finally get away? When he met someone else? Younger, prettier, no child to complicate things. He filed for divorce, emptied our accounts, and left me with nothing but debts and a restraining order that he ignored whenever it suited him. I forced myself to meet Vincent's gaze. Until last night, whatever Enzo said to him worked better than any court order ever did. Vincent was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he reached across the table and with gentle fingers traced the fading bruise on my cheekbone. This will never happen again, he said. Each word weighted with promise. Not while I draw breath. The intensity in his voice, in his eyes, should have frightened me. Instead, I felt something shift inside me. A wall crumbling. A door opening to possibilities I'd thought forever closed. Why? I whispered. Why would you do this for a stranger? Vincent withdrew his hand slowly, his fingers lingering for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Perhaps I'm tired of only interacting with people who want something from me. Perhaps I saw something in you that reminded me of who I was before. He gestured vaguely, encompassing his wealthy home, his position, the life he led. Before you became whatever you are now? I finished for him. A smile touched his lips, sad and knowing. Yes, before that. And what are you, Vincent? I asked, the question that had hovered between us since our first meeting. He held my gaze steadily. I think you know. I did know, or at least I suspected. The deference people showed him, the power he wielded, the security that surrounded him, all pointed to something outside the boundaries of normal business. Does it matter? He asked softly. Tonight? In this moment? Before I could answer, the sound of running footsteps approached, and Emma burst onto the terrace, her eyes bright with excitement. Mommy! The flowers changed colors when I touched them. And the teddy bear talks. She skidded to a stop when she noticed Vincent, suddenly shy again. Vincent smiled at her, the expression transforming his face, softening the hard edges. Hello, Emma. I'm Vincent. Your mother has told me what a brave, smart girl you are. Emma studied him with the frank curiosity of childhood. Are you the king? This looks like a castle, Vincent laughed. A rich, warm sound I hadn't heard from him before. Not a king, no. Just a man with a big house. Emma. Maria appeared in the doorway, slightly breathless. I'm sorry, Vincent. She ran ahead when I told her we were coming to say goodnight. It's fine, Maria, Vincent assured her, his eyes still on Emma. Miss Emma is welcome anywhere in my home. Emma beamed at this pronouncement, then yawned widely, the excitement of the evening catching up with her. I think it's past someone's bedtime, I said, standing and smoothing Emma's wild curls, which had mostly escaped their braids. Can we come back tomorrow? Emma asked sleepily, leaning against my leg. I want to see the flowers again. I glanced at Vincent, uncertain how to respond. To my surprise, he crouched down to Emma's eye level, his movements careful, as if trying not to frighten her. The flowers will be here whenever you want to see them, he told her seriously. You and your mother are always welcome. Emma nodded, satisfied with this answer, and allowed Maria to lead her away to wash her hands before we left. As their footsteps faded, Vincent turned to me. She's remarkable, he said. She has your spirit. Thank you, I replied, warmth spreading through my chest at his praise of my daughter. She's everything to me. Vincent nodded, understanding in his eyes. Family is everything, he agreed, and something in his tone suggested he meant this as more than just a platitude. As we walked through the house toward the entrance, Vincent slightly ahead of me, I noticed for the first time a subtle limp in his gait. Barely perceptible, but there if you were looking closely. Another humanizing detail about this enigmatic man. At the door, Emma was already half asleep in Maria's arms. Vincent instructed Enzo to bring the car around, then turned to me. I'd like to see you again, Lily. he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. Not out of obligation or gratitude, just you and me, getting to know each other better. I should have said no. I should have thanked him for his help and walked away from whatever dangerous world he inhabited. But standing there in the warm light of his home, with Emma safe and David no longer a looming threat, I found myself nodding. I'd like that too, I admitted, surprising myself with the truth of it. Something flickered in his eyes, relief, perhaps, or satisfaction. He reached into his pocket and handed me a small velvet box, a gift, he said, when I hesitated to take it. Nothing extravagant, I promise. I accepted the box but didn't open it, tucking it into my purse instead. Thank you, for everything. He took my hand, raising it to his lips in an old-world gesture that should have seemed affected, but somehow felt natural coming from him. Until next time, Lily Cooper. As Enzo drove us home through the quiet streets, Emma sleeping soundly beside me, I finally opened the velvet box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny key. Attached was a small card with that now familiar slanted handwriting, for new beginnings. VR. I slipped the bracelet onto my wrist, the metal cool against my skin, and watched the city lights blur outside the window. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or where this unexpected connection with Vincent Russo might lead. All I knew was that for the first time in years, I felt something beyond fear and exhaustion. I felt hope. 3 months. It had been 3 months since that fateful night at Bellissimo, when I grabbed a stranger's hand out of desperation. 3 months of cautious text messages, elegant dinners, and careful navigation of boundaries. 3 months of getting to know Vincent Russo, the man behind the power, behind the whispered name that made people straighten their spines and avert their eyes. I still worked at the restaurant, though Marco had mysteriously promoted me to serving the private dining rooms, where the tips were better and the hours more flexible. I hadn't seen David since the night Enzo had confronted him outside my apartment building. According to my lawyer, paid for by Vincent despite my protests, David had abruptly dropped his custody claim and moved to the West Coast. The bracelet Vincent had given me rarely left my wrist, the tiny silver key a constant reminder of possibilities I was still afraid to fully embrace. "Mommy, when are we going to Vincent's house again?" Emma asked as I braided her hair for preschool. "Maria promised to show me how the fountain works next time." I smiled, securing the braid with a purple elastic. "Soon, baby. Vincent's been busy with work." It wasn't a lie. He'd been away on business for the past 2 weeks, though he still sent daily texts checking on us, and flowers had arrived every 3 days like clockwork. "Is he your boyfriend now?" Emma asked with the directness only a 4-year-old could manage. My hands faltered in her hair. "It's complicated, sweetie." "That's what grown-ups say when they don't know the answer," she replied wisely, making me laugh despite my discomfort with the question. The truth was, I didn't know what Vincent and I were to each other. We had shared meals, conversations, even a few brief touches, his hand on the small of my back, my fingers brushing his when he handed me a glass of wine. But he had never pushed for more, had respected the careful distance I maintained, even as something undeniable grew between us. I knew what he was, or at least I had pieced together enough. The hushed phone calls he excused himself to take, the men who watched the perimeter of any restaurant where we dined, the way certain people in the city treated me differently once they realized my connection to him. Vincent Russo was powerful in ways that existed outside the law, and that knowledge should have sent me running. But there was another side to him, the man who listened intently when I spoke of my dreams of returning to college someday, who remembered Emma's favorite ice cream flavor, who spoke of his deceased parents with such raw grief it made my heart ache. That man was someone I was finding it increasingly difficult to keep at arm's length. After dropping Emma at preschool, I returned to our apartment to find a sleek black envelope propped against our door. My name was written across it in Vincent's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of heavy cream stationery. "Lily, I've returned early and would very much like to see you. There are matters we need to discuss. Enzo will pick you up at 7 p.m., if that's agreeable. Emma is welcome, as always. But if you prefer, Maria can come to your apartment instead. Vincent." The formality of the note, so different from his usual warm texts, sent a ripple of unease through me. Matters we need to discuss sounded ominous, final. Had he grown tired of my hesitation? Of the complicated logistics of dating a single mother? Or was it something else entirely? I arranged for Mrs. Patel to watch Emma, not because I didn't trust Maria, but because the serious tone of Vincent's note made me think this was a conversation best had without my daughter present. At precisely 7 p.m., the now familiar black SUV pulled up outside, but instead of Enzo, it was Vincent himself who stepped out, dressed impeccably as always in a charcoal suit that accentuated his broad shoulders. My heart stuttered at the sight of him, a reaction I could no longer pretend was simply gratitude or fascination. "Vincent," I said as I approached, suddenly conscious of my simple dress and minimal makeup. "I wasn't expecting you to come yourself." He took my hand, his touch sending warmth up my arm. "I wanted to see you as soon as possible." His dark eyes scanned my face, as if searching for something. "You look beautiful, Lily. You always do." In the car, a tense silence settled between us. Vincent seemed preoccupied, his usual attentiveness replaced by a distant expression as he gazed out the window. "Is everything all right?" I finally asked as we drove past the city limits, heading north along the coast. "Your note seemed serious." He turned to me, his expression softening. "I'm sorry if I worried you." "Yes, there are serious matters to discuss, but nothing for you to fear." He hesitated, then added, "I thought we might talk somewhere more private than my home or a restaurant." We arrived at a secluded beach house perched on cliffs overlooking the ocean. Unlike Vincent's city mansion, this place was smaller, more intimate, a modern structure of glass and weathered wood that seemed to grow naturally from the rocky landscape. "This is beautiful," I said, as he led me inside, where a fire already burned in a stone hearth. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the darkening sky and the restless sea below. "It was my mother's favorite place," Vincent said quietly. "I come here when I need to think, to remember who I am beneath everything else." The personal revelation touched me. Vincent rarely spoke of his past, and each small glimpse felt like a precious gift. He poured 2 glasses of wine and gestured for me to join him on a low couch facing the windows. As I sat, the bracelet he'd given me caught the firelight, the little key gleaming. "You wear it," he observed, a note of pleasure in his voice. "Every day," I admitted. "It reminds me of possibilities." Vincent's eyes darkened at my words. He set his wine glass down untouched and turned to face me fully. "Lily," he began, his voice low and serious. "These past months have been unexpected. When you grabbed my hand that night, I could never have imagined where it would lead." My heart began to race, fear and anticipation mingling in my chest. "And where has it led, Vincent?" He took a deep breath. "I find myself thinking of you constantly, of your strength, your grace, your fierce love for your daughter. I've known many people in my life, Lily, but none like you." His words wrapped around me like a warm embrace, but the tension in his shoulders told me there was more. "But there are things about me, about my life, that I've kept from you," he continued. "Not out of deception, but out of hope that I could be, for you, just a man, not everything else that I am." "I know what you are, Vincent," I said softly. "Or at least, I've guessed enough." His eyes widened slightly in surprise. "You're in organized crime," I continued, the words strange on my tongue yet undeniably true. "The way people defer to you, the security, the power you wield, it's obvious if one is paying attention." Vincent's expression grew guarded. "And knowing this, you've still allowed me into your life? Into Emma's life?" "I've struggled with it," I admitted. "Every day, I tell myself I should end this, whatever this is between us, that I should take Emma and disappear before we get any deeper into your world." Pain flashed across his face. "And is that what you've decided to do?" I looked down at the tiny key on my wrist. "If I were smarter, perhaps, but no." I raised my eyes to his. "Despite everything, I find myself unable to walk away from you, Vincent Russo." The relief that flooded his features was palpable. He reached for my hand, entwining our fingers. "There's something else I need to tell you. The real reason I asked you here tonight." I tensed, preparing myself for some terrible revelation. "I'm leaving this life," he said simply. Of all the things I had expected, this wasn't one of them. What do you mean? Vincent's thumb traced circles on my palm as he spoke. For the past year, I've been carefully extracting myself from certain business interests, transferring control to trusted lieutenants, legitimizing what can be legitimized, severing ties with what cannot. Why? I asked, stunned by the revelation. Initially because I was tired. Tired of looking over my shoulder, tired of wondering which friend might become an enemy tomorrow. His eyes met mine, intense and vulnerable. But these past months, since meeting you and Emma, the urgency has increased. I want something different, Lily, something I never thought possible for someone like me. Hope bloomed in my chest, fragile and terrifying. What do you want, Vincent? A life where I can take you and Emma to dinner without bodyguards watching every exit. A life where I don't have to shield you from parts of who I am. His voice dropped lower. A life with you, if you'll have me. The sincerity in his eyes took my breath away. Can you really walk away from everything? Is that even possible? It's nearly done, he said. There are complications, risks, which is why I've kept this from you until now. I didn't want to offer you promises I couldn't keep. What risks? I asked, suddenly afraid for him in a way I hadn't been before. Vincent's expression darkened. Not everyone is happy with my decision. There are those who see it as weakness, as betrayal. There was an incident last week, an attempt to dissuade me. Fear clutched at my heart. Were you hurt? No, he assured me quickly. But it's why I came back early, why I needed to see you, to make sure you and Emma were safe, and to ask you something important. He shifted, reaching into his pocket to withdraw a small box, similar to the one that had held the bracelet, but smaller still. My breath caught in my throat. I'm not offering marriage, not yet, he said, correctly reading my expression. That would be presumptuous, given all that remains unresolved. But I am offering a promise. He opened the box to reveal a ring. Not a diamond, but a deep blue sapphire set in platinum, elegant and understated. This was my grandmother's, Vincent explained. She gave it to me before she died and told me to give it only to a woman of true strength and courage. His eyes held mine, intense and earnest. I can think of no one who embodies those qualities more than you, Lily. Vincent, I whispered, overwhelmed by the gesture and all it implied. I'm asking for your patience while I finish what I've begun, he continued. For your trust that I can become the man you and Emma deserve. And when it's done, if you still want me, then we can discuss more permanent arrangements. Tears blurred my vision. You're really leaving it all behind? For us? He took my face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle. For us. For the chance at a life I never thought I could have. But Lily, you need to understand, there may be danger in the transition. I've taken precautions, but I can't guarantee absolute safety. Is that why you brought me here instead of your home? You're worried someone might target me to get to you? Vincent nodded grimly. After the attempt last week, I've increased security around you and Emma, though you may not have noticed. Enzo's men have been watching your apartment, your workplace, Emma's preschool. I should have been frightened by this revelation, but instead, I felt a strange calm. How long until it's finished? This transition? 2 months, perhaps 3. I've moved most of my legitimate assets offshore. Once the final arrangements are complete, we could go anywhere. Italy, France, wherever you and Emma would be happy. Leave the country? The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. Emma's never even been on a plane, Vincent smiled, the expression softening his features. She'd love Italy. Children are treasured there, and you. You would bloom in the Mediterranean sun, away from memories of David, away from the struggle of making ends meet. The future he painted was so tempting. A clean slate, a new beginning, safety and security for Emma. But there was one question I needed answered first. Why me, Vincent? Of all the women you could have chosen, educated, sophisticated women from your world, why a struggling waitress with a complicated past and a 4-year-old daughter? Vincent was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. When he spoke, his voice was low and fervent. Because when you grabbed my hand that night, you weren't seeing Vincent Russo, the man people fear. You were just seeing a potential lifeline. He brushed a strand of hair from my face. And then, when you learned who I was, you still saw the man beneath it all. You questioned me, challenged me, made me laugh when few dared to joke in my presence. He took my hand, pressing it against his chest, where I could feel his heart beating steadily. You make me feel human, Lily. Not a title, not a position, not a threat. Just a man. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my life? His words resonated deep within me. Wasn't that all anyone wanted in the end? To be seen for who they truly were, beyond labels and circumstances? I'm afraid, I admitted. Not of you, but of letting myself believe in this future you're describing. I've had dreams shattered before, I know, he said softly. And I can't promise there won't be challenges. But I can promise that I will never willingly cause you or Emma pain. That every decision I make from this moment forward will be with your well-being in mind. He held out the sapphire ring, a question in his eyes. Will you accept this? Not as an engagement, but as my promise to you that I'm fighting for our future? I looked at the ring, at the man holding it, and at the crossroads stretching before me. The safe path would be to walk away now, before I was in any deeper. To return to my small apartment and predictable struggles, to the life I knew how to navigate. But as I gazed into Vincent's eyes, I saw something I'd been searching for since long before David had shattered my trust. I saw home. Yes, I whispered, extending my hand. I accept your promise, Vincent, and I make one in return, to believe in the future you're fighting for. To trust that what we've found is worth the risk. He slipped the ring onto my right hand. A promise, not yet an engagement. And the sapphire caught the firelight, sending blue sparks dancing across our skin. Vincent raised my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles, then to the inside of my wrist, where my pulse raced beneath the bracelet he'd given me. Lily, he murmured, my name a prayer on his lips, and then, finally, after months of careful distance and restrained touches, Vincent kissed me. His lips were warm and firm against mine, his hand cradling my face with a tenderness that made my heart ache. I melted into him, all my doubts and fears temporarily silenced by the rightness of being in his arms. When we parted, breathless and dizzy, the world outside had darkened completely, leaving only our reflections in the glass and the distant shimmer of stars above the ocean. I should take you home, Vincent said reluctantly, his forehead resting against mine. Emma will be waiting. The mention of my daughter brought reality rushing back, the complications, the dangers still unresolved, but instead of fear, I felt a newfound determination. 2 months, I said, touching the sapphire on my finger. We can be careful for 2 months. Vincent nodded, his eyes serious again. Until then, there will be rules to keep you safe. I'll explain everything on the drive back. As we left the beach house, Vincent's arm protective around my waist, I caught a glimpse of movement in the darkness, a figure near the tree line, then another by the cars. Vincent's security, watching over us even here. A reminder of the world he inhabited, the world he was fighting to leave behind. In the car, Vincent explained the security measures he'd implemented, the men watching our apartment, the secure phone he wanted me to carry, the safe house prepared if anything went wrong. I listened carefully, understanding that these precautions weren't signs of his world intruding on mine, but his way of shielding me from it while he dismantled his empire. And after? I asked as we approached the city limits. When it's over and we're wherever we decide to go, what then? Vincent's hand found mine in the darkness of the car, his thumb brushing over the sapphire. Then we begin again. I have legitimate businesses, hotels, restaurants, vineyards, enough to keep us comfortable without ever having to look over our shoulders. And if someone from your past finds us? If this doesn't end as cleanly as you hope? His grip tightened slightly. I've been careful, thorough. But if that happens, we'll face it together. I won't let anyone harm what we're building, Lily. Not ever. The fierce protectiveness in his voice should have frightened me. It spoke of capabilities I didn't want to contemplate. But instead, it comforted me. After years of feeling vulnerable, of being at David's mercy, the idea of someone fighting for me, for Emma, felt like finally reaching solid ground after treading water for too long. When we reached my apartment building, Vincent insisted on walking me to my door. In the dim hallway outside my apartment, he pulled me close one more time, his kiss deeper now, edged with a hunger we both knew would have to wait. 2 months, he whispered against my lips, and then a lifetime if you'll have me. I'll have you, I promised, the words carrying the weight of a vow. After he left, I stood in my small living room, the sapphire gleaming on my finger, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a future without constant struggle, without fear. A future where Emma could grow up safe and cherished, where I might pursue the dreams I'd abandoned, where love didn't come with conditions or bruises. A knock at my door startled me from my reverie. Thinking Vincent had returned, I opened it without checking the peephole. A mistake. David stood in the hallway, his face flushed with anger or drink, possibly both. So it's true, he spat, pushing past me into the apartment before I could stop him. You're fucking the mob. Fear shot through me, but it was quickly replaced by anger. Get out of my home, I demanded, keeping my voice low so as not to wake Emma or disturb Mrs. Patel next door. You have no right to be here. David's eyes fixed on the sapphire ring, his face contorting with rage. I lose everything because of you. My daughter, my reputation, and you get rewarded with jewelry from criminals? How long have you been whoring yourself out to Russo? My hand moved instinctively to the secure phone in my pocket, but David grabbed my wrist, twisting until I gasped in pain. You think I don't know about his men watching this place? He hissed. I had to wait weeks for an opening, for them to get sloppy, but it was worth it to see for myself what kind of mother you've become. Let go of me, I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. Or I'll scream, and Mrs. Patel will call the police. David laughed, a bitter sound that raised the hairs on my neck. The police? You think they'll help the Mafia boss's whore? Something in me snapped at his words. After months of growing stronger, of learning my worth through Vincent's eyes, I refused to cower before David any longer. I am not afraid of you, I said, each word precise and clear. Not anymore. I twisted my arm sharply, breaking his grip with a move Enzo had taught me, just in case. David stumbled back, surprise replacing anger for a moment before his face darkened again. You stupid bitch, he snarled, lunging toward me. But before he could reach me, the door burst open. Enzo stood there, his imposing frame filling the doorway, his pale eyes assessing the situation in an instant. Behind him was another man I recognized from Vincent's security team. Mr. Cooper, Enzo said, his voice deceptively calm. I believe you're trespassing. David froze, his face draining of color. This doesn't concern you. This is between me and my wife. Ex-wife, I corrected sharply. Ex-wife, Enzo repeated, stepping fully into the apartment. Who happens to be under Mr. Russo's protection? A fact you were made aware of months ago. David's eyes darted between Enzo and the door, calculating his chances. Russo's not untouchable, he said, desperation edging his voice. People are talking. His own people think he's gone soft. A chill ran through me at his words, so similar to what Vincent had told me about resistance to his plans to leave his criminal life behind. Enzo's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Mr. Cooper, I'm going to give you one chance to leave peacefully, for Ms. Cooper's sake and for your daughter's. The mention of Emma seemed to reach David in a way threats to his own safety hadn't. He glanced toward her bedroom door, then back at me, conflict evident in his face. She deserves better than this life, he said, and I couldn't tell if he meant me or Emma. Better than him. That's not for you to decide anymore, I replied quietly. Please leave, David. Don't make this worse than it already is. For a moment I thought he might refuse, might force Enzo's hand. But then his shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. This isn't over. he muttered as he moved toward the door, but the words lacked conviction. Enzo stepped aside to let him pass, then followed him out, leaving his associate at my door. I'll ensure he leaves the building, Enzo told me. Marco will stay with you until I return. Mr. Russo has been informed and is on his way. After they left, I sank onto the couch, adrenaline still coursing through my veins. I checked on Emma, relieved to find her still sleeping peacefully, unaware of the confrontation that had just taken place. When Vincent arrived 20 minutes later, his face was a mask of controlled fury. He gathered me into his arms, his body tense as he checked me for injuries. I'm okay, I assured him, leaning into his embrace. Really, he didn't hurt me. Vincent's jaw clenched as Enzo recounted what had happened, including David's comments about Vincent going soft. This changes things, Vincent said after Enzo finished. We need to accelerate the timeline. What do you mean? I asked, suddenly afraid. Vincent's eyes met mine, determination replacing anger. It means we leave sooner than planned. Tonight, if possible. Tonight? I echoed, stunned. But Emma, my job, our things, essentials only, Vincent said, his tone gentler now. I have properties where we can stay until the final arrangements are complete. Places no one knows about, not even my closest associates. I looked around my small apartment, the home I'd built for Emma and me after escaping David, the safe haven I'd fought so hard to maintain. The thought of leaving it all behind with no warning was terrifying, yet the alternative, staying and risking another confrontation, possibly one where Emma wouldn't sleep through it, was worse. How long do I have to pack? I asked, my decision made. Relief washed over Vincent's face. An hour. Take only what you and Emma absolutely need. Everything else can be replaced. As I moved through the apartment, filling a suitcase with clothes, Emma's favorite toys, our important documents, I felt a strange sense of liberation. Each item I chose to bring, each one I left behind, was a step toward the future Vincent had promised. A future I was now fully committed to, dangers and all. Emma woke briefly as I dressed her in warm clothes, her sleepy eyes questioning, "Are we going on an adventure, Mommy?" I smoothed her curls, my heart full of love and determination. Yes, baby, the biggest adventure yet. In the living room, Vincent was on the phone, speaking rapidly in Italian. When he saw us, he ended the call and crossed to lift Emma into his arms. To my surprise, she went willingly, resting her head on his shoulder, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Ready?" he asked me, his free hand extended toward mine. I took it, feeling the warmth of his skin against my palm, the solid strength of his grip. 3 months ago, I had grabbed a stranger's hand out of desperation, never imagining where that impulsive action would lead. Now, I was taking that same hand by choice, walking willingly into an uncertain future that somehow felt more secure than any I had known before. "Ready," I confirmed, the sapphire on my finger catching the light as Vincent led us out of the apartment and toward our new beginning. As we stepped into the waiting car, Emma already drifting back to sleep between us, Vincent squeezed my hand. "I will keep you both safe," he promised, his voice low and fierce. No matter what it takes, I believed him. Not because he was powerful or dangerous, but because in the depths of his dark eyes, I saw the same determination I felt in my own heart. The resolve to protect what we had found together. This unexpected love that had blossomed from a moment of desperation. The city lights faded behind us as we drove into the night, toward a future neither of us could have imagined 3 months ago. A future we would build together, step by step, day by day, leaving the shadows of our past behind. I had grabbed a stranger's hand to escape my ex-husband, not knowing he was a Mafia boss. But what I had found wasn't just protection or security. It was a second chance at love, at family, at happiness. And this time, I wouldn't let it slip away.